weird because, like, as humans, we live these whole lives, right? Like, we go to work, we have our relationships, but in the back of all those stories is this narrative of our bodies that it wants to procreate. And that's actually running in the back all the time. We've decided to distract ourselves with a bunch of other things. But that's the body's number one purpose on some level, keeping us safe and procreating itself. So I don't know why we deny ourselves that reality when it plays such a big part in everything we do.
Hello, I am Hayden, your host and licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party, and this is the Evergreen RX. Today I am joined with my wonderful friend, Roxy. She is joining us to talk all about periods, not just the bleed, but everything else in between, how it impacts emotional, physical, mental well-being. Roxy is also a licensed therapist. We work together at the same practice in Austin, so I know some of how she's kind of incorporated this knowledge of periods into her work as a therapist into, you know, her life in general. She's asked me a couple times where I'm at on my cycle, and so I think she's got some good stuff to share with us.
I'm always tracking.
Always tracking, yeah. She's like, I know where you're at right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even.
Okay, good.
So we're just really hoping you guys walk away with information on the 4 phases of the cycle, a little bit about how it impacts you, and also just kind of what to start to become aware of so that you can track it in your own body. Because I think one of the things we run into a lot with learning about the cycle is, one, just the barrier to like even knowing anything about it, because we only ever hear about the period. But also really being able to tune into how each phase shows up for you specifically. You know, so we'll talk about that, and we want to talk about how to kind of cater your life in a way that's possible to making these phases a little bit easier. And we'll talk about birth control. We'll touch on that and some of the ripple effects that has on connecting with our body and our cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, so Roxy, hello.
Yes, hey.
You want to start by telling everybody a little bit about each of the phases?
Sure. So we'll be talking about a 28-day cycle, which is an important note because our world is not set up for a 28-day cycle. We've been set up for a 24-hour cycle, right? The expectation is you show up the same way every day, but a female body does not work like that. We are kind of seasonal. I like to compare it to Mother Earth, right? Mother Earth has 4 seasons, and we kind of have 4 seasons as well. So the first where we're going to start is the menstrual phase of our cycle, which I like to compare to winter. It is a time that many don't per se enjoy, but some do. Progesterone drops, estrogen drops, our energy levels often drop. You kind of want to be spending that time doing more introspective activities, nourishing your body with warm foods, self-care. It really is like a winter hibernation type of vibe and period, right?
Yeah. So if our world was structured in a way that was conducive, this would just not work.
Yeah, or work less, or work from home very cozily, reduced hours. Yeah. Maybe less social meetings, right? Maybe more research, or like being able to dive deeper into something.
Yeah, that was something that we were talking about before we hit record on, you know, during this time, your like energy field is so much bigger.
Yeah.
So picking up on other people's moods and what people are bringing in is like even more heightened.
For sure. So even knowing for yourself, who do I feel safe spending this like more vulnerable time with? Am I gonna go to a party where I don't know anyone while on my bleed? Depends on where I'm at, but probably not if I'm being a bit more sensitive and I'm more particular about who I want to be surrounded with. Like being mindful of that, knowing how you can show up or how you can't in that moment.
Yeah. Okay, so that's day 1 through 7. If
supposedly,
you're having,
if you're regular.
Yeah, a regular cycle, which like amazing
God bless
if you're
you
really
if you
on that
are.
28-day cycle. Okay, so then where are we at next?
Then we're going to go
Post-winter.
spring.
Spring.
Follicular phase. That's the female's equivalent of springtime. Follicular phase. And it's kind of when we start getting the hormones of selecting an egg for us to drop later on.
Jeez.
I know, it's exciting. Egg, spring, kind of like Easter. I don't know.
Yeah.
We see the connections there. And that's when the progesterone and estrogen starts to rise again, and you might start feeling that energy level pick back up.
Yeah.
Right.
So then you can kind of like, I know one of the big things, which I'll just throw this out here now, I made like a little Pinterest board of like some infographics.
Cutie.
And yeah, so I'll have that linked if you want to like kind of look at this in a visual manner, because there's like a lot of different things on Pinterest that are basically all saying the same things about these 4 cycles, but sometimes the formatting is a little more conducive. Like I like the seasonal kind of approach a lot more. Yeah. But what you'll see on a lot of these is like exercises to do, which I think is helpful. In some ways it bothers me a little bit, but this would typically be like your spring time is more like you would be doing like more cardio or a little bit like
a brisker walk.
Yeah. Maybe like a more intense yoga flow.
I've seen a lot of people recommend more intensive breath work during this time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Because also breath work can be super energizing, right? So like as you're riding that wave upwards, it's nice to further stimulate that with breath work. Eating fermented foods, fresh foods, more like raw, bright foods. It really gives springtime, doesn't it?
Yeah, really. It's kind of easy to remember when you think about it that way. It's like, yeah, what is kind of going on during spring? Are you going to eat like a crudité in fucking winter? Like, I don't think so.
You're eating something warm and cozy in wintertime, and then something more bright as like your energy levels rise. And also knowing that you're building back up from a place that is less energetic, allowing yourself to also eat more carbs, right? Like building that energy back.
Yeah.
And being okay following your intuition with like, oof, I need a little something more here.
Yeah, that's another thing about Roxy is like she's always got a little snack. She's really
I'm a squirrel.
Paying attention to energy levels and the impact that food has on it. And sometimes I'm like, I didn't really use that. I'm like, I don't remember that my brain needs the food for like actual thought to happen. I'm like, I'm not hungry.
But also for bleed, right? And for like building back, you need this. Everything's powered by food, so bringing it back there, kind of demonizing food. It's not something to be counted, but it's something to just really utilize to build your life back and build your energy back, and it's a building block. It's a tool.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So what's next? Now we're moving into summer.
Summer, my favorite, ovulation. I love to ovulate.
Which ovulation is the one that's like typically thought of as, you know, you're feeling beautiful. You're feeling magnetic.
Are technically, you look your most beautiful when you're ovulating, technically.
I gotta tap into that because I texted you like a while back and I was like, I'm ovulating right now, but I wouldn't think so because I think I feel the worst during this time.
Gotcha. Well, so this is around day 14, day 21, and this is when the egg decides to drop, so it's ready, right? So your body's going to give every signal to those that could potentially fertilize you or the people that you are attracted to. Like, it's
time.
Yeah, it's going to put its best face forward. I'm thinking of like a bird with its feathers all poofed out, like you're showing your skin's glowing, your hair is bouncing, all that good stuff.
Amazing.
Much more high energy, much more brain power during this time, supposedly. I definitely feel that way. I'm not sure if you do.
I can't like track it onto like actual ovulation, but we can get into this later because I think my cycle is like all over the place.
Yeah.
But there are times of the month where I do recognize that my brain is like firing.
Is back.
Yeah.
I'm
like, I always think I'm like, oh, I'm growing up. My prefrontal cortex is coming online, and then it just drops the next week, and I'm like,
it's
no,
just higher levels of estrogen, progesterone.
Pump me with it, please. Like,
oh, I love that.
Yeah, so this is like people are gonna be more social. Like this would be the time, like join a new group or like go to a party with a bunch of strangers.
Yes.
Like go on dates.
Yeah, higher sex drive. They recommend eating more like colorful foods, higher protein foods, just like it's giving summer, high in fiber, high in omega-3s, doing the more high impact workouts during this time. So if we're doing brisk walks in spring, then we're jogging, we're sprinting in the summertime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. So I think what's so interesting as we're going through these, like the more we're talking them out, it like really starts to highlight like how much connection there is to the actual season.
Yeah,
We
isn't
were
it
like,
wild?
that's exactly how summer feels when you're in summer.
Yes.
You're like a little more like tan, maybe. You've been out in the sun, like you've
Even
got
just
the
talking about it, I'm feeling it.
yeah, right. Maybe because it's also like
Yeah.
beautifully sunny outside, or like it feels like that now. But
Yeah.
okay, so last phase prior to the bleed coming around again.
Luteal, which actually the menstruation is part of the luteal phase. So
Okay, cool.
that menstruation is just like the second half of it. But the luteal phase is kind of like the fall, and we'll see those hormones start to fall back too. Like the estrogen and the progesterone. There's also different ones that come up. Like when we're ovulating, our testosterone is much higher. So and cortisol also peaks during different parts of the cycle as well.
Yeah.
But we don't per se have to get into that right now. But that's something to consider as well. You might feel more anxious during this time, for example, during the luteal phase.
I must be at that.
So basically what happens is if the egg hasn't fertilized, the body is like, oh, we're going to drop this now. Like, we don't need to spend the energy to kind of keep this alive and nourish it. Because your body spends a lot of energy also during the ovulation phase, basically making a liquid to keep the egg alive and keep the sperm alive and like nourish the sperm and all that. So there's a lot more energy that's being spent down there. So when the body senses, oh, I don't need to do this, it drops the egg, right? And then we kind of start going into like that pre-menstruation phase.
Yeah. So you're starting to slow down.
Yeah.
Do, lighter, little gentler movements.
Yeah, some more like yoga versus like, like a HIIT workout or something like that. You start craving more sugar because you've expended all this energy. You might start having some mood swings because it's harder to regulate your blood sugar during this time too.
So this is what's thought of as PMS.
Yes.
This is the phase.
Yeah. This is a time to kind of like just reflect and focus on really simple things, right? Like not making any rash judgments. It's kind of like the classic of sometimes anxiety has something to tell you and something anxiety is just anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe not to make any rash decisions during this time. Yeah, and eating like very regular balanced meals, knowing that right now your blood sugar may be a little bit more up and down. So you want to be diligent about food intake.
I feel like it's tricky too because I don't know about you, but I feel like my appetite fluctuates a lot during like the whole cycle, but especially the pre-period phase, I do feel like my appetite kind of goes away a little bit, which is, I know a lot of times people will tend to be like,
what's the feeling you feel during that phase?
Like with my appetite?
Just like, not with appetite, but just in general. What's a feeling that might come up for you during that time of the month?
I feel like I'm like having a test.
You are.
Like,
I'm testing you.
I don't know. Maybe more anxiety.
Yeah. So sometimes anxiety can kind of give the body the signal, right? I'm not hungry, even if you are.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
Because I've only ever noticed that when it's like extreme anxiety where I'm like, okay, I feel like tight in my stomach. So of course I don't want to eat.
Yeah.
But more subtle, it's like,
just
those links never get put together.
Yeah.
I feel like, I think even when we're talking about like what is happening with like the actual egg process that you've kind of outlined and all of the ways the body is responding to that is so interesting because we're only ever thinking about when the actual lining is shedding.
Yeah.
But there's like the whole story around why it's doing that, and at every other part it's doing something for this.
It's weird because like as humans we live these whole lives, right? Like we go to work, we have our relationships, but in the back of all those stories is this narrative of our bodies that it wants to procreate, and that's actually running in the back all the time. We've decided to distract ourselves with a bunch of other things. But that's the body's number one purpose on some level, keeping us safe and procreating itself. So I don't know why we deny ourselves that reality when it plays such a big part in everything we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, remind me what you majored in.
Why?
It was some science, wasn't it?
Chemistry.
Oh,
So
chemistry.
it's not related to this.
It's not related, but you're sciencey.
I'm sciencey, yeah.
Yeah.
And both my parents are microbiologists. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think that adds
Yeah.
context. So you're a genius.
No.
Yeah, you are.
Do I sound smart right now?
Yeah. Okay, so any other notes you want to add on to the 4 phases?
I think that having an awareness, right, of like where you're at can help you kind of tailor and maybe also like tailor your life to that moment, like bringing yourself back to your body, being present with what's going on, not only with like your thoughts, your feelings, but also maybe just like this other program that's constantly running that we might have ignored or we're so used to that we don't bring it to the forefront anymore.
Yeah. I think it's just the awareness that you're talking about, like just bringing that into context with what is going on in the rest of our lives. Because I think, we talk about this with work. There's this feeling with anybody's job, but, we talk about it in the context of being a therapist that you need to be on all of the time.
Yes.
Like every session you have, every day of the week, every week of the month, like, and holding yourself to the standard of like those best sessions that you have. Mm-hmm. And that's just not always going to be possible.
Yeah.
And especially when you're adding in like being somebody that does like go through a cycle. And I mean, because I think men have their own version of hormonal fluctuations, but not like this.
It's a little different.
Anybody that experiences this, there can be like a lot of judgment around like, why am I not working off of the go, like constantly producing, constantly being at the top of your game kind of like workflow.
I get tired just hearing you even talking about it because it's so unrealistic.
Yeah.
Right? Like that mindset, that hustle mindset is so built on this idea that you go to sleep and you're fully recharged, that you run on a 24-hour cycle, but that's not how the female body works. That's basically, it's been established based on the male body and their response. They regulate every night. We regulate over 28 days.
That's insane. That's an insane difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of brings me to something I want to talk about, which is like how each of these phases and these constant fluctuations that happen over, an entire month, how they impact our body and like the perception that we have of ourself and of our body, because it's always changing.
It's constant. Yeah.
Because it'll come back, like I think that's part of the trick is like when you're ovulating, you might like feel really good. You're feeling really comfortable in your body. And then that goes away. But then all of a sudden it's back again. And it can be easy to start thinking like, what did I do then that I'm not doing now that made me feel better? Or what workouts was I doing that, I felt like my body looked better. And then I lost it. It's like, no, it was there for a little while and then it came back a little later because you're back at that part of your cycle. Like, yeah. So how do you think that impacts our perception? And I know you work with clients a little bit too on having this awareness.
I think it's being able to manage your standards for yourself at different times of the month, right? Like, and also knowing if you do know that you feel better about yourself during that ovulation period, then maybe that's around the time that you do those activities that feel more daunting for you, right? Or when you know that week before your period, that's a hard time of the month for you, to kind of pack in some extra self-care, right? It just takes some extra planning to keep you at least around baseline of like feeling good. Yeah. Because you can add things in to kind of help mitigate some of those stressors.
Yeah. So like during ovulation, maybe you don't really have to focus so much on self-care because you're already like at higher levels. Good. You're already feeling good. Yeah.
And if you think of like life in sections, right? Like if you have like the social section, the spiritual section, your environmental section, or whatever, your physical section, really spending that chunk of the month there being more social, expending more energy, like pre-planning that. Whereas maybe in the section where you feel more like you want to isolate, that's like a time when you recharge by like reading or doing some like intellectual pursuits or journaling more. But like you still get to feel like you're accomplishing things, but they're just different types of things.
Yeah, I think there's so much to kind of normalizing that and like we're saying, bringing it into the forefront of our
Mm-hmm.
awareness, because I know, I struggle with this, and I see a lot of people like online talking about too, like that idea of, why do I pick up a hobby and get really excited about it,
Yeah.
and then I put it down and I don't do it again, or
That's funny, yeah.
like things like that, where it can be very hard to think like, oh my God, I was doing this so much for like a week and then I just stopped.
Yes, and then people call it like a hyperfixation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like you got to treat yourself as like 4 different people. Maybe that version, the version that ovulates, right? That's the part of you that's really into that more high intensity activity. But maybe the person, like, while you are in your more like luteal phase or follicular phase or whatever it may be, that's the person who likes to do that knitting thing that you picked up for that random week and were obsessed with.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. I mean, just kind of looking at each of these different parts of us, or if we imagine them as like these little, personalities. Like, who's that girl? Like, I don't remember that girl from 3 weeks ago. Like, she's coming back. Like, Mister.
Yeah, and even you might have different friends that you reach out to during different parts of your cycle, right?
Ooh. Oh, I love that.
There's certain friends that like you are more comfortable being that more emotional person, whereas some of your friends value you when you're like more high energy. So honoring that too. Doesn't mean that they're not good friends, but it means that there's certain times when you are more likely to feel connected to them.
Yeah, kind of what your connection is based off of too. If you have somebody that's a friend based around a hobby, then it is going to be, and if that hobby is something like, some kind of workout, you might only see them at certain points.
Exactly.
Okay, so what do you think the line is kind of between trying to mitigate the negative impacts of our cycle versus like just letting things be the way they are and know that the only reason we kind of see our cycle as a problem is partly because of the negative effects, but partly because the way that the rest of the world is structured?
Where is that line? Yeah, it's tough because we do live in the world that we live in. So it's kind of just picking your battles, right? If taking something out of your life is hard, maybe it's adding something in instead, right? Like, oh, I have to go to work and my work is high energy. Like our job, for example. It's not like we suddenly get to decide, oh, I get to take the week off, or like, I don't get to do my best, right? But knowing that maybe afterwards you need some extra stuff in place, like a warm meal or a phone call with a close friend or journaling, right? Like doing the extra little bit.
Yeah, not expecting the same output out of yourself all the time.
And managing that piece too, like your expectations for yourself.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the astrologer Chani. Have you heard of her?
No.
She has like a podcast. It's called The Astrology of the Week Ahead, and just like a really famous astrologer. But I bring her up because she has like really, really cool progressive hiring, like, or employee benefits and like, livable wages for everybody, like really generous time off, and the whole company takes like time off, one part of the year or whatever. But one of the benefits is you can take time off for your period.
Wow.
Which is like crazy. It's like she's talked about that she gets like a lot of hate from like business bros online because they're like, this is not sustainable. You can't have a successful company. And
but
she's
it's
like,
not sustainable running yourself into the ground too.
Yeah, well, fair point. I guess it's easy for a 24-hour cycle person to be like, just sleep
and sucker through it.
Yeah, sucker through it. But I think it's so interesting because that's such a radical idea kind of right now. But hopefully that'll become more and more of a thing too.
It's interesting too because like our work output is also expected to be the same through all the seasons of Mother Earth.
Yeah, and which is crazy.
Is that a valid expectation of all humans?
Yeah. So I wonder, like, we've already touched a little bit on different exercises and different foods, things like that. But I wanted to touch on seed cycling a little bit because you hear about this a lot. Have you heard about seed cycling?
What kind of seeds?
Like, it's like pumpkin seeds, flax seeds.
No, I have not.
Sunflower. Yeah, so there's a video that I can also link below that I kind of learned about this from too. It's this YouTube girl, Hitomi, and I mean she didn't come up with it, but she was just sharing about it. And basically it's like during I'm going to forget the details on like which seeds or which phase, but like during 2 parts of your cycle, you're supposed to eat like sunflower and sesame seeds,
Interesting.
like a tablespoon a day.
Okay.
And then the other 2 parts are pumpkin and flax.
I wonder if we looked up those seeds, like when they're harvested, if they match up with.
Oh, that would be fascinating. Because I know that it's that they naturally have like progesterone and estrogen in them.
Interesting. So it's to help mitigate those levels.
Right. So I tried that for a little bit.
And
I would put my seeds on my yogurt.
okay.
I don't know if I noticed much of a difference.
How long did you do it for?
A couple months.
That's a long time.
And I don't know if it's also part of the thing that we will touch on in a little bit on like my cycle just doesn't really seem super easy to figure out.
Yeah.
So that might have been part of the issue, because I can imagine it would maybe make things a little worse if it was the wrong seeds at the wrong time.
Possibly. I also wonder too if we look at those phases of the cycle, right? Being more high energy, lower energy, more introspective, all that. Who you are naturally as a person, right? You mentioned Cancer Moon.
Yeah.
Maybe being more high energy feels a little different for you, or doesn't feel as settling as it does for other people.
Yeah.
I'm a Sagittarius, so for me it's like high energy, high yes. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love like adding in more of that context too of like, you know, I love astrology. I love, you know, there's like Myers-Briggs, there's like your Enneagram, your, you know, human design, whatever the hell. And that's all like stuff that we kind of relegate to like the personality. But especially like astrology, which I know better than some of those other things, informs a lot of what activities we're drawn to, like what kind of jobs we would want to do. So that would kind of stand to reason that then it goes to like what our natural energy is like, what our predisposition to, you know,
where we feel more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that would have like an impact too. Because I think it's hard, like if you're thinking about trying to learn more about your cycle, it'd be like, well, let me talk to my friends and learn about theirs. And
yeah, such an individual experience.
Right. So this is a point where I kind of do want to touch on not being able to track your cycle well, largely often due to birth control.
Yes.
What do we do about that?
Depends on the type of birth control you're on. So if you're on a non-hormonal one, then you can just track it normally. But if you're like on Mirena, you can actually, and you usually don't get your period when you're on Mirena.
That's hormonal?
It is very light hormones.
And it's an IUD?
Yes.
Okay.
But once it's been in for 8 months, I believe, then you can use your basal temperature to figure out when you're ovulating. So at least you'll know when you're ovulating, you'll be able to map from there.
Okay, yeah.
So if you don't get your period, you can go and basically your basal temperature is higher when you're ovulating. So because your progesterone levels are the highest, and progesterone also mitigates how, like, your body temperature. It's very related to that. So when you have a higher level of progesterone, which peaks during ovulation, you have the highest body temperature of the month. So it's you can track it through that.
So even if you don't have your period, you would still have that fluctuation? Yeah, I think for me, and I guess you can tell me maybe if you had any ways, or like when you started to really tune into this, what helped you with figuring out where you were at? Because part of it, I feel like there's some resistance to like paying a lot of attention to it too.
Why?
I don't know. I've talked to other people that are like, I try to track my period and like I just can never stick with it. I think the apps suck. So many of them suck. I don't know if you have one that you like, but like the symptoms that you can select on there are usually really limited and weird. And like, I don't know. I think that there is some kind of resistance, and I haven't really figured out where that comes from.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm alone in it.
It's so interesting. I guess for me, it affects me socially so much that once I stopped fighting it, it made my life way better. Like just knowing what I could expect from myself and what others could kind of expect from me, that it was very helpful. So I guess the resistance kind of fell away once I kind of tapped into that.
What does that look like when you say like you tapped into the social side of it?
So for me, it's like, I know I can't drink if I'm already feeling a little sad, you know? And being a reformed party girl. I kind of just like was really getting down on myself that I wasn't able to show up the way I could at different parts of my cycle, right? Like I was like, why do I feel so good sometimes and not so good other times? Being able to tap into that and giving myself an explanation and knowing like, okay, maybe during that week if I do go out, like I'm not going to drink as much as I would maybe when I'm ovulating. I might do something more relaxing or just like knowing where my boundaries are for myself was really freeing.
Yeah.
But it was really being expressed how I interacted socially, and that's a big part of how I see myself and my values, that it felt important enough for me to notice and pay attention to.
Yeah, that's a good avenue, because I think, again, you know, the most common way you hear of tracking is like either like kind of what fluid is coming out of you, which I think that can be impacted by a lot of things.
There's mysteries that come out.
There's mysteries. There's unknowables.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like energy level.
That fluctuates a lot for me too. So.
And you have to kind of have something to like bounce that against, almost like social settings like is like a way to gauge what your energy level is actually like, because of like what it feels like inside your body when you're in those moments. For sure. And you're socializing with people. It's like work, because it's so routine and like our life is built to be very much like day in, day out, same thing. Yeah. It can be harder to notice like more of the subtle changes.
For sure. So I guess when it comes back to tracking, just also maybe start counting starting with the first day of your period and like when it ends. Yeah. So you'll at least know when you're in the menstrual phase if you get a period. And you'll have an idea when you're starting that next phase. So at least you'll know like the end of your menstrual phase and the start of the follicular phase.
And also, I don't know if you know this, because like you I'm like Dr. Roxy.
Yeah.
People that don't get a period, do they still have like faux symptoms? Menstrual cycle?
Like, I don't know. I think it depends. Phase? I know people who have the Mirena do still get like a phase.
Yeah. Because if you said it's like the kind of second half of the luteal.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that it's just more of kind of that same, you're not feeling super high energy and more of the mood fluctuations and stuff. Oh, which that I think needs to be normalized a lot more too, because I think it'd be very easy to be like, I don't get my period with my birth control, so like I don't have like a period, meaning like basically any of the negative effects. Which it's like, no, you definitely still have hormonal fluctuations, and you have other hormones that are now in there too.
Yeah,
which is a mess.
Confusing your body.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. So this has been really interesting and informative. I think we can kind of walk away with a lot from this, and I wonder if you have any last like little tips or PSAs or like anything you'd like.
I think the one thing that we didn't really get to chat about that could be of interest to the people listening, all the people listening, is the where your period lands, or your menstruation lands in correspondence with where the moon is at. It's kind of an interesting topic. So if your period begins during the new moon, you are thought to have a white moon cycle, which means that you kind of focus your energy more outwardly. So it's like you're nurturing your friends, you're nurturing your family, and typically those women were more supported by just society at large, whereas women who started their periods on the full moon were considered red moon cyclers. And
drama.
Yeah, they actually were considered like more witches, more independent thinkers, and a lot of their energy was directed inward. So you're in a time of like self-actualization usually when your cycle sinks to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were saying it can switch too.
It can. Well, periods of stress, right? Like your cycle is not always very regular. So say you're going through a big life change, your cycle might switch up.
Yep.
And sync to a different moon cycle. Yeah.
That'd be really interesting to map things to that and kind of see where you're at. And
I know during grad school I was bleeding during the full moon.
Okay, so
every
that's
time.
like nurturing, right? That's the
No,
one.
that's the self-actualization
Oh,
one.
okay. You were the red moon witch.
Yeah. It's funny too because when you are starting your period with the new moon, so like that white moon cycle, you tend to ovulate with the full moon. And so you're also more in sync with Earth because technically the full moon is like when Earth is more fertile,
Yeah.
just like with the cycles of when things grow and all that. So yeah, both have benefits.
Very cool. Yeah, because the female connection to the moon and like that's seen, divine feminine
For
and
sure.
more already like those qualities.
And even we call our cycle like our moon cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
I love saying that. I want to normalize that
My
more.
moon.
When people are like, "What's going on?" Well, I'm on my moon. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, well that is so cool, and thanks for the fun little fact and all the information that you shared.
Thanks for having me
today. Yeah. Follow along and tune in for more conversations on wellness, spirituality, the moon,
Yay.
all things like that, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.